Hey everybody, Objectively Dan here. It is July 4th, 2025, which means it is a holiday for those of us in the United States. So in lieu of a live show today, we are going to show you a previously recorded live episode with myself and Forrest Valkai. So I hope you look forward to that. Please enjoy the live chat and the live broadcast of today's pre-recorded show. And thank you to everyone that supports the show. You guys are amazing. With that, I hope you enjoy.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host tonight, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week where we talk to you about what you believe and why. Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. And every single week, I always have a very special guest. This week is no different. This week is Forrest Valkai. Forrest,
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Forrest, I think I unconsciously wanted to put on a nicer shirt tonight because I knew you were going to wear a t-shirt because you typically wear it in your videos, because I think we kind of look alike, dude. I think like we're both white dudes with like kind of curly brown hair and like
everything.
And it's all there. And it's like, I was like, we were talking and I was like, God damn, he really kind of like, we could be cousins, dude. That'd be really interesting to see. But anyway, Forrest Valkai is here with us. Forrest is a science communicator, is on YouTube, TikTok, you name it, and he's doing stuff. So, Forrest, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
It genuinely is a pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you so much. And Forrest, this is Truth Wanted. This is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to the separation of church and state and the promotion of positive atheism. So if you guys have a question about atheism or about science or about evolution, creationism, whatever you want to talk about today, please come call into the number. It's 512-991-9242. And we'd love to talk with you. Forrest is itching to talk to you. He was talking about how he just wanted to take some people down today before the show. He said he had a bone to pick. So
I'm a violent man, and I'm excited to just start cracking heads here.
That's what you're typically known for, is your violence, I'd say. I think that's your most recognized quality in your videos is your violence. So anyway, Forrest, you talk a lot about science. What's your professional credentials in the field of science?
Yeah, so I'm what's called a science communicator or an informal science educator. I hold degrees in education, general biology, integrative biology with an organismic concentration, which I could go into a long detail about what that means, but I'm not going to right now. Long story short, I study lots and lots of different kinds of biology and other sciences as well in order to get a bigger picture, kind of holistic approach of what life is and how life works. And now I'm a grad student finishing a master's in bioanthropology, specifically studying human evolution, doing research in paleoecological reconstruction, understanding ancient ecosystems, and using stabilized dope analysis to rebuild them. And I
know some of those words.
Yeah, science is just my life, man. I've been teaching it and studying it for like a decade, and I'm stoked to death anytime I get the opportunity to share it with somebody. So those are my credentials. Just a long time of being a huge freaking nerd.
A long time being nerd. Well, I could say that about myself too, but my nerdiness is probably not as productive as your nerdiness, so that would be a big difference, I'd say. Less time playing video games on your part, I imagine, and more time staying up reading textbooks and writing papers. So good for you.
You're spot on. It's hard. Spot on.
Yeah. Well, you have made a splash on YouTube and TikTok. You make a lot of videos about all kinds of stuff. I want to talk to you a little bit about your recent, you do the series on creationism, which is really interesting. So what inspired you to talk about creationism, and what's your, well, how do you feel about it? Do you think it's a good, you're in support, broad support of
Dan,
creationism,
you
right?
might be surprised to find that I'm not a fan.
Oh, okay.
I'm not into it. I started on TikTok and just teaching all the science that I love so much. I'm a biologist, so especially teaching about biology, and I study evolution specifically. So talking about evolution and getting people excited about it. And one day, my fiance and I were just hearing yet another person prattling on about how evolution makes no sense because you can't turn rocks into humans, and that's what evolution says. And
Right.
and I was just going off about it, and she pointed out, like, you should absolutely record yourself reacting to these things and let people hear why these things are wrong. And that was the first episode of my most popular series on YouTube, which is called Reacteria, reacting to anti-science claims, which was going to be all sorts of anti-science claims, but has really largely become about creationism because a lot of other anti-science claims aren't quite as harmful and quite as aggressively weird, but and just not as fun.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What makes creationism in particular so harmful? Because obviously there's a lot of like bad ideas or untrue ideas out there, but like why is creationism so nefarious, like in particular?
There's a few reasons. Because with any kind of pseudoscience, any kind of anti-science, we have people like Flat Earth or talking about chemtrails or talking about the dome over the world and how we've never been to space and all these different things.
Yeah,
those are problematic because it sows distrust in science, and it teaches people that it's okay that if you can ask a question about something, that means that it's wrong, and there's no reason to believe in it, and that's a problem in and of itself. But with creationism, it becomes especially problematic because when you don't understand evolution, you can't understand a lot of big issues. Modern medicine, for example, is based on evolution. If you don't understand evolution, you can't cure disease. You just can't. There's a reason why it is the central theme of all biology. But also, it puts people on a pedestal where they don't belong. If you believe that you are, this specially created thing that's different from everybody else, then you're going to act that way. And you're going to act like you own this planet and you own everything on it and you're superior to everything on it. And if you pollute the oceans and set the forest on fire, not me, but the other ones, and do whatever else that's destructive, then that's totally fine because it's your planet to do with what you will. And that's deeply problematic. Also, a big issue with it is that it leads to, people believing that they're the special ones. We see this a lot when we talk about creationist claims is people say, well, I'm the special kind of human. I'm the one that was made for it. And it's not just religious creationism. I get this a lot with people who talk about how aliens made us. You'd be surprised just how often people try to talk about that with me.
Forrest, I promise you, I would not be as surprised as you think. Would not be as surprised as you think.
With this show, you might be right.
Yeah.
But just like I get this all the time. It's like, hey, I'm the special kind of human. I'm the best kind. And so there's a lot of ramifications to it. And I'm sure that the average everyday creationist would hear this and think that I'm overreacting, but I promise you I am not.
You're right though. You there's some good things in there. Like I don't think people realize how deep it really goes compared to other stuff, right? Like the wedge issue stuff, right? We're talking about people actually putting creationism into textbooks, into schools, right? Like the flat earth people, they got their conferences, but they're not trying to change the textbooks at school, right? Like that's not on anybody's agenda. That is actually on the agenda for a lot of state public institutions, which is crazy to think about if you're outside the United States. But in the US here, like that is a big deal. And some parts of Canada as well for the homeschool curriculum, and some other various places as well. But that's a big thing.
We have stickers on public school textbooks in a lot of states that say, warning, this contains evidence or information about evolution, and evolution is just a theory and you shouldn't take it. And like, if that's how you're going to treat this, if you're going to teach kids that this is just a theory and you don't have to believe it if you don't want to, if you have bills like we have in Oklahoma right now, there's a bill being introduced that says that a student's parents can sue the teacher for $10,000 if they teach anything that goes against their religious beliefs. That's seriously problematic. And it makes you
Yeah.
wonder, why don't they do that any other time? Why aren't they talking about, hey, we're going to talk about plate tectonics today, but remember, plate tectonics is just a theory. Cells are just a theory. Germs are just a theory. It's because that would be crazy. This is the only time when we're allowed to do this, and that's a problem.
Yeah, in Texas here, it was like a year or two ago, we passed a thing putting Moses in the textbooks as a historical figure, which is really fun. But yeah, it's pretty bad when it comes to our public education. But you mentioned another thing that I don't think people talk about enough, which is the environmental impact of a belief like this. Like people who have vested like economic interests in the exploitation of our natural resources, like they're not going to care either way. But the people who vote on these issues, right, which is like a broad Christian public, like they genuinely draw upon, like they'll cite that verse in Genesis that talks about how God gave man dominion over animals and of the earth and stuff, and say, well, that means we can do whatever the fuck we want. And it's like, well, actually, we live on a planet with finite resources, turns out, and we have to kind of like deal with that as a collective society if we're gonna like continue to use it. But unfortunately, you know, there's these people that don't feel the same way, and part of that is because they have a view of history and a view of the future that says we're all gonna get torn up in the rapture in like a couple years anyway. But in the past as well, as far as this is what the earth is, this is what's created for, and we're using it for the purposes that God intended, which, you know, is something we would not agree with.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to bring up as well when you're talking about, you know, people's belief about like biblical creationism, especially, is that, you know, that involves this idea of the rapture. And right now, we have around, I think the numbers off the top of my head, around 40 to 44% of American adults genuinely believe that within the next 50 years, the clouds are going to part and Jesus is going to come down and end the whole world. And so the question with that, because people say, oh, why don't you let me believe what I want to believe? Well, if you move into a new house and the house is absolutely, you know, pristine and beautiful, but you're told, hey, in a couple of weeks, we're going to tear the whole thing down. Are you going to work hard to take care of it? Are you going to work hard to keep the floors nice? Are you going to work hard not to break the bed and to shatter the rafters? You're going to have fun and do whatever you want if you think that it doesn't matter. And so if you have 44% of the country who believes that it doesn't matter, that in 50 years or less, that this whole world's not going to be here anymore and it doesn't matter anyway, why would they care about climate change? Why would they care about systemic issues like racism and hunger and poverty? Why would they try to fix anything if all we're doing is sitting here waiting by the phone, just checking our watches? Oh, any minute now, it'll all be
second. We're going to get out of here. Yeah, so, it's true. It's true. I care less because I'm a little more hopeless that we're not going to be able to fix this stuff. But that's different from believing that I'm going to be magically lifted into the sky or whatever, like in that Nicolas Cage movie.
That's just healthy depression. Everybody's got
it. That's what that is. But no, you're right. It's weird. It's weird people's attitudes. Now you were saying 44% earlier, and I said because I thought you were going to talk about the statistic that says what percentage of America believes in creationism. And I believe like BioLogos, which is an organization that teaches like evolution, but also Christianity. Like, I think they did a survey and they said like somewhere around at least a third of Americans believe in young earth specifically. And then more so believe in not young earth, but still believe God created the earth and some other things, which is much bigger than other countries, I should point out. Most of the world
Venn
does
diagram
not.
On these numbers. It's tough.
Very, very weird and interesting to see. But, you know, Forrest, I'm so glad you get to be on this show because this is the show where we talk to callers. And I think we should talk to some callers now. What do you think?
I'm into it. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. Well, before we get to the calls, we have to thank our patron of the week because every single week, Forrest, we always thank the wonderful patrons that help make this show happen. You guys rock. You really do help keep the lights on and make this show happen. So I want to thank everybody that donates on Patreon, but we're going to give a shout out to one in particular this week. And this week's patron of the week is Ayame or Ayami. It's unclear. These things don't come with pronunciation guides. They really should. But Ayame, thank you so much for donating on patreon.com. And you can do that too if you go to tiny.cc/PatreonTW. you can make a donation there and help support the show and help make guests like Forrest Valkai come on and do cool stuff. So thanks to everybody.
I wouldn't be here without your Patreon.
That's well,
first.
That's
and I was
right.
like, they have enough
I
people
started
behind
saying that,
me.
and I was like, you know, he's not here because of our patron numbers. I don't know why I went there, but the point is, it's good to support the show.
I'm not paid to be here.
You're not paid to be here. I should make that very clear. But anyway, little slip of the tongue there. But we should probably get to some callers now, and we have a lot of people that want to talk to you, Forrest. So thanks to everybody. Yeah, thanks to everybody who wants to call in. Yeah, let's talk to Danny. Danny is calling in from Virginia. Danny, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Danny.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going really well. How about yourself?
Going pretty good. I'm working right now. This is my first time calling. I just stumbled across, some of y'all's videos, and so obviously, have a few questions, and I guess y'all opened my mind to a lot of things that I didn't realize before.
We're open to a lot of things. Some would say I'm too open-minded to some things, Danny, but we're free to talk to what you want to talk about. So let's hear it.
Okay, so I grew up in what they call the Southern Baptist South, and through my teenage years, I got sent off to what do they call it? Pretty much the hate gay camp in Tennessee. And so I always had this battle with religion, and especially with my sexuality and everything, I was condemned for it. But at the same time, it's, drilled within me throughout my life. So my question is, I didn't know if there was a way to have Christianity, but be a realist at the same time. Like, for instance, I know the Bible is BS. Like, I will fully admit that. Like, in reality, I know it's shit. But kind of like in my feelings, it feels like it's wrong if I denounce that, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely makes sense. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yes, totally.
So a couple of things about that. First of all, holy crap, that sucks. I'm so sorry I had to go through that. That's incredibly rough. Also, the thing is, when you're brought up around these things, and I don't mean just Christianity, you're brought up around anything. If every single day somebody tells you this is the truth, and you're a good person if you believe this, and you're a bad person if you don't believe this, and just they drill this into you, and then every week you go to a big building full of a bunch of other people who think exactly the same thing, and they all say it together, that's going to have a lasting impact on your life. And when it's something that you've been doing for years and years and years, you can't expect to just get rid of that within a few days, a few months, whatever. So give yourself a break there, as far as having this in your brain. Just understand that that's trauma. Those are things that were done to you that cause real scars. And the way that I always say it is, when you talk about, like, for example, talking about sexuality and whatnot, and you're trying to balance this, and you still have these triggers, these traumatic ideas come up. You remember what these people said, and that might be the first thing in your mind. That's what was taught to you. That's what you were trained to think. The second thing that you think, the thing you think right after that of, okay, no, that's bullshit, like you said, and actually I don't have to think. That's you. That's who you really are coming through. And what I would like to ask you to do with this, just as a thought experiment, is try to compare the two. Really try to weigh those two reactions. When you hear about a gay human existing, what's the first thing that jumps up from this past that you've been told to say? And then what do you actually say about it? And when you compare those two, you might realize they're so strikingly and dramatically different that you really don't need this first thing at all. And if you're talking about Christianity in terms of like, well, I can pick through this and try to find the nicest things about it. I can try to just, 80% of it's bad. The book's bad. The message is bad, but there's some pretty things in there too. The way we say it where I come from is pick through the turd to try to find a bit of corn. Man, is it worth it to do that? And is it worth it to have a completely different set of rules for everything in your life, everything in your morality, everything about who you are as a person, but then you have a very special little separate set of rules for this one particular thing because you want to hold on to it because you were told for most of your life that good people do that. So I think what you're experiencing right now is a contrast between your personality, your good nature, and your culture, what you were raised in. And I don't
100%.
think that it's a bad thing to, throw up your middle finger to the way you were raised and say, you know what, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be my own person. I'm going to follow my own heart, my own mind. Damn the consequences. I think that's totally reasonable to do.
Yes. I think personally for myself, I wasn't a Christian for longer than I was willing to admit, because I didn't want to drop that Christian label, because in the United States, particularly here in the South, there is a connotation that comes with being a Christian. If you're a Christian boy, I was a young Christian boy, right? It's a good thing to be that. And you don't want to drop that. If you say that something is unchristian, that has a synonym in this country of being bad, which is ridiculous because it shouldn't describe someone's moral character or who they are. But that's the association we tend to have. And I think that causes some people to kind of, when they deconstruct their Christianity, at the same time, reconstruct it to fit something else. That's why I think you're seeing a bigger movement of progressive Christians, not just because they're reinterpreting their theology, but also they're trying to reconcile how to fit in with the current culture versus what the church has taught them to believe when they grow up, right? So there's a lot of things to wrestle with there. So whatever label you choose to do with yourself, like do with that as you will. But I will say, if you choose to drop that Christian label, you're not only doing good stuff like what Forrest was saying, but also you're helping to destigmatize that label of not being Christian and show that, like, hey, even though I'm not a Christian, whatever label you use, atheist, agnostic, whatever, I'm still a good person. And you can still look at the actions that I do and the things that I do believe in and the things I don't believe in and see that it still makes sense. I could still live a happy, healthy, full life. So there's good reason to kind of drop the whole Christian thing altogether. And I also would say, look, there's probably Muslims that probably struggle with this too, but I have no reason to call myself a Muslim, right? Just because I think I want to try to do good in the world. A lot of Muslims want to do good in the world. The only reason I struggled with that Christian label was because, like Forrest was saying, we grew up as Christians. Culturally, we identified as Christians. So it's hard to imagine it any other way. So that's a lot of stuff from me and Forrest. What do you think, Danny?
I think that's great advice, and I really appreciate that. And just as you said, it's a stigma that if you're not a Christian, they automatically assume you're a bad person. So it's throughout
100%.
my adulthood, I've had to go far and beyond of being a good person to the point where, I give everything that I have, the shirt off my back, to anyone just to show them I'm not a bad person just by the way I look or just by my partner. I don't want to be labeled as, a bad person just because I'm me. I just want to be me.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly,
and you have a right. You have a right to be you. Go ahead, Forrest.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's monumentally impressive, and you have a lot to be proud of with that. To be able to really just nail down who you are and live in that. And even if you do feel like you have to prove to somebody else, because man, I'm from Oklahoma. I can't tell you how many times in my life, if somebody does something good, I've heard, oh, that's very Christian of you to do. Yep. Because that's a nice thing to do. And I can't tell you how many times I've told somebody, hey, I'm an atheist. And they're like, but you seem so nice. Well,
I've gotten that too.
Yeah. And and like Dan was saying, there's a stigma there that you're going to have to work around a little bit. If you're not, cisgendered and straight, you already know what it's like to have stigmas that you have to work through all the time. Like you were describing, just trying to prove that you're actually a good person. And that, man, I'm not going to pretend for 1 second that doesn't suck, that you have to prove who you are to everybody in a way that nobody else has to do. But I would say it's honestly, it's so much better to have the opportunity to reevaluate everything that you know to be true, reevaluate all of your loyalties, reevaluate everything that you think is good and bad and right and wrong, and really ask yourself why. And at the end of the day, you'll probably come out largely the same person, but there might be some bullshit in there that you find that you just don't have a need for and that you're better off without. And from the way that you're able to speak on these things, I haven't heard from you for more than a couple of minutes here, but the way that you talk about these things, it sounds like you're already pretty good at doing that. It just kind of like reevaluating yourself and second guessing assessing yourself and double checking yourself and being able to ask those big questions. That's the whole point of it, man. I think you're doing a great job at it.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad things that come with dropping the label, right? Dealing with the stigma, dealing with the social situations that arise from it. But there are some benefits too. And the best thing, in my opinion, for me, was living my most authentic self. You know, besides the awkward social situations, weddings, funerals, you know, those kinds of things where everybody kind of has to be a different person for a little bit. Like, I can say and do what I want because I genuinely believe / don't believe in certain things. And that's good because Christianity really does keep you from doing that. There is a kind of a thought control, kind of a thought police that says you either have to do this thing a certain way or think about things a certain way. That's really harmful psychologically. And obviously we've all, it sounds like 3 of us have dealt with the fallout of that at some point, or maybe not you, Forrest, but you know,
I've witnessed the fallout of that.
You've witnessed the fallout. Yeah, you've definitely witnessed the fallout. So, you know, there's going to be hope for another generation if we all keep doing it. I do believe that. I do think as more people are coming out and more people are being true to themselves, that more people can feel comfortable and free to speak their minds about these things. So I hope you are getting that courage as well, Danny. It sounds like you are.
Well, I appreciate you guys' help so much. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever tried to actually reach out and, like you said, ask these questions instead of just asking myself. And, you know, it's really helpful and reassuring to myself that I'm not just, you know, crazy or, you know, maybe I should just stick with the flow. But I agree that there should be more people that should just stand up and be themselves and not fear the repercussions of other people's thoughts or actions.
Yes,
absolutely. Take ownership for who you are and you know who you want to be. Man, I was never raised religious, but I still put up a Christmas tree every year, and I still celebrate that with people who I love. We don't talk about Jesus or anything like that, but we have certain traditions because that's the way I grew up. And so, like, you can put in as much or as little of whatever tradition, whatever culture, whatever thing you like. You don't have to attach anything to it. Don't let anybody tell you who you are or what you have to believe or what you have to think or how you have to act or how you have to emote or anything like this. I think Dan hit the nail on the head about living your most authentic self. I'm reminded that tired old saying of it's better to be hated for who you are than loved for who you're not.
That's right. So haters gonna hate.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And if I think what you just said is so important, this is your first time speaking honestly about this and reaching out to somebody about this, and you've already clearly got a good handle on it. You've clearly been thinking about it for a very long time. Man, I think you're going to do just fine, Danny.
I think so too. I think so too. Danny, you're getting a lot of love in the live chat right now, just FYI. So take solace in that and talk to some other people there. I encourage that too. I bet you there's some other people you can connect with that can share your experiences. We have to go to another caller now, unfortunately. But Danny, thanks so much for talking with us. I hope we were helpful. And I wish you well on your journey because it is a journey. It doesn't, it gets easier. It gets harder sometimes, but it does get easier, I think, overall. I do honestly believe that. So before we keep continuing on, I have to, again, give a little bit of a plug here for our store. In case you are curious and you want to get some Truth Wanted merch, we got some merch for you to look at. So check out some of the swag. We'll show it to you on the screen here, but we got the hoodies, we got the t-shirts, we got the mask. Look at that stuff. Yeah, it's hoodie season, baby. So if you want to get a hoodie, definitely check it out. Unless you're on, those weird parts of the world like Australia and stuff. But you can get it for later. I mean, it's still there for you. So anyway, check out that stuff if you haven't already. And you guys are awesome. Everybody that wears that Truth Wanted merchandise. So we got some more callers that want to talk to us. This is an interesting one. I think you'll like this one for us. We're going to talk to Jay calling to us from Missouri. Jay, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yeah, I just got one more. The Bible says to love your neighbor as yourself. And so if it's anything, contrary to that, you could tell that people haven't read their Bible if they say that Christians don't care about racism or Christians hate gays. That's contrary to the Bible. So
yeah, I would also say it's true that Christians were the majority slaveholders in the United States, and we're also some of the biggest proponents of segregation laws in the country. So I don't know if historically that's always been true.
Well, there were Christians that were fighting to free the slaves.
That's true.
So
yeah, that's also true.
I think that was fake. That just because you say you're a Christian doesn't, and if you're contrary to what the Bible says, then guess what? You're not a Christian if you're over there having slaves. And it's not can't happen, bud. Sorry to tell you that.
So
did you?
The issue that I would have though is that like you have, I get where you're coming from. It's the old no true Scotsman thing. You're not a real Christian unless you think about it the way that I think about it. The question I would point out is that like
what it says. I didn't say that. I didn't.
Right, but you do know that Jesus like not only talked about slavery but used slave parables like in his speech.
He also said that he's not coming to change the law but to fulfill it, and there's that whole part about the Bible that's about slavery, and then also that like everybody in the KKK is a Christian too, so they're reading the same book and getting something totally different. So also, like
Paul says that tell slaves to obey their master. Well, actually, Jesus says for slaves to obey their masters and stuff. Like
these people are reading the same thing you're reading and getting a totally different message out of it. So I agree that part is in there, but there's a lot of other horrible stuff in there, and so like maybe the problem is the source.
Yeah. Maybe
we could just make a clear document that just says, "Hey, don't have slaves."
You got to read the whole Bible.
I know. I don't. But see, that's the problem. I think
come to you have to read the whole Bible. You can't just take bits and pieces out of it. Sorry, you have to read the whole.
I know, Jay.
Like I said,
I know some people that have read the whole Bible and still believe that. Jay, listen, there are plenty of people in history that have read the whole Bible and have done atrocious, terrible things. I don't think it's just reading the Bible. It really comes down to interpretation. And while, yes, I agree with you, people will take some things out of context. No, Jay, listen. I got to put you on mute because you got to let me finish here, okay? I will agree with you that people will take things out of context, but I will also say that context doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it comes down to action, the majority of action. If 90% of Christians were racist, right, I would say that Christianity is a racist religion. I don't care if the Bible didn't actually say to be racist. Now, I'm not saying that the Bible says you should be racist. I do think there's some racist elements in the Bible, especially if you look at the Old Testament and see that, what was going on was nationalism between, different tribes and stuff. But point is, you can't say, well, they're not really this thing because this thing says this, because it's just this no true Scotsman over and over and over again. Now, I know Forrest, I think, enough to know that he's not going to make arguments that say, oh, you're a racist, or all Christians are racist, or all Christians do X, Y, and Z. But we still have to, we still have to point out when like the connection is there, because like it's there, and it's not just about racism. It's also about prejudice against homosexuals, prejudice against people of different faiths.
Whoop!
Can I talk? My turn.
Looks like Matt exploded. He's gone. The whole thing I would throw in there as well is that like you're talking about, you have to read the whole Bible in order to understand it. I guarantee that Fred Phelps and the Westboro Baptist Church have read the whole Bible. I would bet good money that these people have read the whole Bible, and they're still out there waving signs with the F slur talking about how God hates this and that. I guarantee that the Confederates had read the Bible. There's enough of them had. I guarantee that there are plenty of people that read the parts of the Bible that say that I can rape a woman and then give her father enough money and then she's my property now. Did they act on that or not? Oh goodness, is it in the Bible? So like this idea that you just have to read it enough or read it properly. If I have over 1 million followers on watching me on TikTok right now. I have people that listen to the things I say. I am very clear on TikTok. I talk about how homosexuality is natural and how it's not something that should be hated. I talk about how race is a social construct and how racism is wrong. If I had a bunch of people listening to me who are also out here saying, see, I listen to Forrest and that's why I know that white supremacy is the right and that gay people are evil and all that eventually falls back on me. I've done something very wrong that someone's able to listen to me and come up with that. I need to now be very clear to say, hey, guys, just point of interest, if you're racist, you're stupid. That you have to know that. And like that, and if I'm not doing that, that's my problem. So if you have this book that in one half says, hey, you can totally own people and use them as farming equipment, and if you rape a girl and pay her dad, it's cool, and sell your daughter into sex slavery, that's fine, and that gay people should be stoned to death, that's totally radical. But also, hey, love your neighbor as yourself. That's on you, champ. And then people are getting totally different messages. Whose fault is that? That's clearly the issue with the book that just clearly should have said, hey, by the way, don't own humans. Don't do it. Wouldn't have to have this argument with you right now.
It's true. It's true.
Well, just because you talk for 10 minutes doesn't mean you're right. And because the Americans that were slave owners were Democrats, and the Democrats always been racist.
Yeah, and what does the KKK currently vote for, if you don't mind me asking?
Been racist, and you're a Democrat. Yeah, okay. So you're probably a racist. So guess what?
I don't subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to that at all. Aside from the fact that we can't even talk about politics too much on this show because we are part of 501c3. We can historically point out that. Yes, there were Democrats that were racist. There's also Republicans that were racist. But are they pointing to a book for it? Like,
and also like, the Democrats were the racist one. And then there was a party switch that's well documented. And even if that wasn't the case, you hit the nail on the head when you said, who are the racist people voting for today? How many racists are standing up being like, yeah, Bernie. And like, that's, that doesn't really track. And also, the last thing that the guy said, I don't know if he's still on the line or not.
He's still on the line. I got him on mute, but I don't know how much farther we can talk about. Originally, he wanted to talk about evolution. I thought we were going to go there, but this was
the last thing that he said was that if you're a Democrat now, you're probably racist. And like, I would love to see your data on that, because I'm not sitting here saying all Republicans are racist, and if you're a Republican, then you're there, because that would be an insane thing to say. I could say that depending on your voting habits, I could say depending on this and that and the other, but like, no, man, that's a really weird, big generalization. Racists are racists, and racists are assholes, and racists have historically been the problem in history. If you're going to point to 200 years ago on their voting record and then try to equate it to now, I'm sorry, bro. That's a really, really weird and lazy argument to make.
Yep, it's true. All right, Jay, I'm going to unmute you again, but you are on thin ice, my friend. Okay, so let's make sure that we have a good conversation.
President Biden's always been racist, and you guys voted for him, but you guys want to point fingers at Republicans. And
how do you know? Wait, hold on, Jay. Do you have access to my voting history? How do you know I voted for him?
I guarantee you're an atheist. You vote Democrat. I guarantee you that.
Because
you hate religion.
That's an interesting man.
I hate to, you got like 5 words in, and I don't want to go on a whole other thing here. I want to hear you out, but like just to be really clear here. I want to point out 2 things about Biden. Number one, I don't like Biden either. I did vote for him because, and I am not exaggerating here, I would have actually voted for a half-boiled squirrel over Donald Trump, who is, well, I don't know how far I can go because it's a 501, but like literally anybody over would have been fine. He was the best option that we had, but I don't like him either. I think he's a terrible, I'm not into it. So, like, just because I voted that way to get us out of a crap situation, it's like if you have 2 buses and one of them's going kind of in the same direction as your hometown and the other one's going into a volcano, you take the one that's kind of going towards the town. Maybe you walk the rest of the way. You know what I mean? It's better than just saying, well, I might as well go into the volcano if this one isn't really going directly to my house, So, like, that's that, man.
I'm going to go ahead and drop the call because we are totally off tangent anyway. He wanted to know about evolution. And why we can't trust it because
Jay.
You wanted to talk about the Piltdown Man, and we didn't even get to that.
Oh, that's a cool conversation.
I know. We ended up talking about race, which is
race and Republicans and
just like way out of left field. I don't know
how weird.
Yeah, you should explain what the Piltdown Man is, though, in case he does want to come back and listen.
So just really quickly, Piltdown Man, because I'm guessing. I'm going to paint you unfairly here, Jay. I'm going to assume what your argument was going to be based on the tone and the substance of the rest of the call. I hope that I'm wrong, but I bet you I'm not. Is that evolutionists is the word that people like to use. Were wrong about Piltdown Man. That turned out to be a fake, and that it was proven to be a hoax, and therefore XYZ other thing in the fossil record is also hoax, or we can't trust science, or something else along those lines, because that's what it always is. So let's talk about what Piltdown Man is very quickly. I'll be as fast as I can about this. Be very succinct. Piltdown Man was a hoax in England. Some dude took an orangutan jaw, cut off the connections, and filed down the teeth to make them flat and look a lot like human molars as much as possible, and then took some chunks of a human skull that was particularly thick and boiled them in iron oxide and all sorts of other stuff to make them look like fossils, and then left them in a construction ditch. And an amateur paleontologist found them and was like, oh, flip, these are ape bones. Clearly, this is a new novel hominin. And they put it out for all of the other bioanthropologists and evolutionary biologists to see. And lots of people refuted it and debated about it. The dentists came in and were like, hey, these wear patterns are insane and make no sense. And all the scientists were like, shut up, dentists. And then
this is why we need to listen to our dentists more. Okay.
And then later on, better science came around, and we learned about fluorine dating, that fluorine soaks into bone, binds to calcium because it's super duper electronegative. And the longer a bone's in the ground, the more fluorine's there. And the fluorine on the jaw and the fluorine on the skull were totally different. And then this was clearly actually an orangutan jaw.
Right.
And so better science proved Piltdown Man wrong. Right. And what this teaches us is a couple of things. Number one, it teaches us an important lesson about the history of science, where at the time it was all about who is the scienciest scientist, and that's why we didn't pay attention to the other fields when they were telling us, hey, this is stupid. Also, not as many people took it seriously as creationists like to claim. It's like Nebraska Man, which was the one with the pig tooth that they made a whole person. Most academic papers at the time were like very, very skeptical of this. Also, most importantly, it points to the racist history of science at that time, where, all these scientists were really willing to believe that the story of human evolution was African ape, African ape, African ape, white Englishman, and then humans came along. And that's weird. And so it's a valuable lesson. It's a valuable story in science. It taught us a lot of really important stuff. And now we have moved on. So why don't you? Is the whole thing there.
And the big thing to point out with a story like this is the reason why we know the Piltdown Man isn't real is because of science. We used science to figure that out. And that is true for every single other bogus science thing that's happened in history.
All the time.
Every single one.
Just a little bit ago, you probably heard, I think it was last year, they found phosphine on Venus. And everybody was freaking out about, oh my God, we proved life on Venus. See, all the headlines, signs of life on Venus. And then scientists came along and were like, hey, these numbers are kind of dubious and weird. Let's check again. Oh, turns out it's completely different than what we thought. Maybe everybody can calm down now. Yeah. So that's the nature of science. It's just we find something out, we ask a bunch of questions about it, and when we can fail to reject something, that's when we move forward with it. And it makes you beg the question, man. What works? Dogma or progress?
Yes. And speaking of moving forward, I want to move forward to our promo that we got showing some of the other shows that we do here at the Atheist Community of Austin. Check this out.
Well, you can't be gay. You have biological children. You've obviously had sex with a woman. I'm like, yeah, at least 3 times. Bravo on the math, bud. People are allowed to change.
And in science, you don't start with an answer. You start asking questions to try to determine the answer. And when new evidence becomes available, you sharpen or even adjust or change the answer. That's the beauty of science.
Hard Christian nationalism that we were hearing in America, we're now hearing all the way up in Canada as well.
Hey,
it spreads.
We had QAnoners in Ottawa for the last week and a half. It's
honking their horns and pooping on things.
It's not just an American problem.
The world is so cruel, it's so evil. Why did God create it this way? But if we were like some weird crab monster that have evolved instead, then we might just be like, oh, well, yeah, who cares? I eat my own kids all the time.
Then you were lying before, and then you lied again when I told you that you were lying about it, because you don't get to call it Noah's Ark, and you don't get to say it was Noah's Ark, and then acknowledge, as you've done twice now, that there's no way to demonstrate that it is Noah's Ark. Why are you lying for Jesus?
Previously on the Atheist Experience.
You're on with me and Seth, so what have you got for us?
Oh, you said Seth?
Yeah, Seth Andrews.
Okay, I don't think I know him, but I just want to make sure I got his name correct. I went to your site, and you have "What do you believe?" ? And why. And so the question comes up of, how do we even get the start of all this?
And now, Truth Wanted, Revenge of the Seth.
Jacob, you're live on Truth Wanted.
Hi, Seth, and I don't know your name. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that in
Dang! Jacob, you came on the show, dude. You just came for. Oh my God! You just followed.
Oh, that's my new ringtone.
You think
that's
I just
my
want
new
Seth
ringtone.
on for clout? Is that
No.
what it is?
Thank you, Jake.
Oh my God! So glad I got to be featured on the bonus clip there. Call into the show and didn't know who I was. I almost anticipate that today, Forrest. So far, it hasn't happened yet. So
that's cool. I don't know who I am. It's
That's great. Oh my God. But yeah, those are all the other shows. You should definitely check some of them out if you have not already. And with that, I want to go ahead and talk to our next caller. We've got a couple of people who want to talk with us. Next, we're going to talk to TH, who is calling in from Kentucky. TH, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi, TH.
Oh my God. I can't believe I got on. I'm so excited.
You did it. Congratulations. I'm excited for you. What's up?
My first preamble, I saw, objectively, Dan, I saw you with Anthony Magnabosco. And, back when you were a believer, and you were just so adorable, so Jesus-y and stuff. I'm so glad you came to your senses finally after talking to him a few times.
Yeah,
Nerd.
I really was. I don't know about adorable, but I was definitely something. I wish I have a lot of things. I don't have that tan anymore. My hair was different. It was a cool time. But yeah, that video, in case you're wondering, is out there of me as a Christian talking to Anthony Magnabosco when I was 19 at the time, still on YouTube. So you should definitely check that out if you haven't already. But anyway, TH, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I listen to you guys and all the other shows on YouTube all the time while I work because I don't have to actually watch the TV. I can hear you in the background. But I have a kind of a unique problem. My kids, one is 27 and the other one is like 24. And the younger one, they both refuse to get vaccines. And I know you all talk, you're like, oh, we'll just talk this and say this to them. But you can't do any of the things that you suggest when it's your own children. I'm going to be in their lives and I want, the best for them. And he'll go on these spiels or he's like, he has points like, Vietnam was a lie. The government admitted that. There was the crack in LA situation. So he's got all these examples showing you can't really trust the government. And, I'm like, well, he's got some points there. And then I tell him, I'm like, oh, and he also watches the alien things. He thinks aliens built the pyramids and stuff. And I'm like, all that stuff's been debunked. And he's like, why is the stuff that you look up better than my information? And I'm trying to get him to, to find better sources. He just like, just like everything he sees, he just believes it is real. And I told him, like, we got this shot. We're not dying. There's not a black car following us, around everywhere we go because they put a chip in me or anything. And I cannot make him understand that the sources that I find and I use, they just are better. I know how to, weed through the weeds or whatever. Just because a show says aliens probably built the pyramids, you can find a site that'll prove anything. His mom said, I'm closed-minded and I should listen. And I'm like, but the flat earther, do you really need to listen to their ideas?
Yeah, TH, this is so interesting because a lot of times this conversation is about how do we talk to our parents about this? And this is kind of the opposite. You're trying to talk to your kids about this. So I find that dynamic really interesting, but I want to harken back since you already mentioned it, right? When you look at my conversation with Anthony Magnabosco, and that conversation was a long one, it was like 30 minutes long, you'll find that I didn't end up being an atheist at the end of that conversation. I still had a journey I had to go through. And I think, like, if I could give you any advice through this, it's never going to be a couple of magic words that are going to act as bullets in this. I think you have to really take this from the question-seeking perspective and not necessarily point out stuff that's wrong and say, oh, well, this is untrue because this, you can do all that. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to the epistemology of one situation to really figure out how you can come to the beliefs that you do. When somebody goes to therapy, right, they don't go to like one session and then that's it. Like, cognitive behavioral therapy takes multiple sessions because not only is a belief an acceptance of certain premises as true, it's also psychological. This is a very psychological thing that's happening here, and you have to acknowledge that element in order to be most effective in these conversations. So I wish I could say, oh, well, you just need to say X, Y, and Z, and you can do this, but that doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. What I can suggest you do, and it's probably stuff you already know, but maybe me saying it to you right now will help reinforce it. I have to reinforce it myself, is ask the kind of questions. What do you believe? Why do you believe this? And how do you know it's true? If you stick with those three and variations thereof, that's when you can be the most productive in your conversations. And it is a process, and it's not a guarantee. I really wish it was, but it's not. But that's really the best you can do. And maybe they'll become more trustworthy of some things. Maybe not everything you hope for, but maybe you can at least open their mind to go down other paths. But Forrest, what do you think about this? Because this is interesting.
So as an educator, these are things that I run into quite a bit, where people tell me that they can't trust any science at all. That we have to have arguments over what evidence exists, what evidence should count as evidence, whether or not evidence matters. These are all things that we have to deal with all the time. And the thing that I find is productive, and like Dan said, it's not going to happen all at once, but it can kind of start this conversation where you kind of start down this path, is dissecting other topics of science for a minute. Because a lot of the times, there's actually been some really cool psychological studies done on this. People who believe in crazy conspiracy theories will believe in several different things that logically conflict each other. They just only think about them one at a time, and so it doesn't bother them. They don't have that cognitive dissonance. So, like, for example, the same people who believe that Princess Diana was killed in a international conspiracy to destroy her and her dynasty and all this, also believe that she faked her own death and is currently living in Cuba with the Illuminati running the world. And same thing with Osama bin Laden. The same people who believe that he faked his own death and is secretly living somewhere else also believe that he was dead for years before 9/11 ever happened, And so when you talk to people who believe these things and who watch shows saying, well, there's no evidence that aliens weren't at the first Thanksgiving, therefore they were. Rather than addressing that head on, maybe let's talk about, okay, you don't think that vaccines are safe. Why don't you have polio right now? Why don't you have smallpox right now? Is there something else going on there maybe? Or if you don't want to hit vaccines directly, if they don't believe in vaccines, okay, well, what about antibiotics? When you broke your leg as a child, why did we go to a hospital and they put it back together? Why did the x-ray machine work? Why, break it down until you get to these points where it's like, well, yeah, duh, obviously. Okay, cool. So we can start from there. And we can start agreeing on that. And now we can build our way up a little bit more. And you don't have to be an expert in any of these fields. You don't have to be a scientist to be able to kind of start making these connections and building these bridges and then saying, okay, so I know this is true because of the information that I'm getting. Now let's compare your sources here. You have this meme on Facebook. Radical, very interesting meme. Here is a doctor who spent his whole life studying this. Is it more likely that he's paid off to say this, or is it more likely that maybe the meme isn't the best thing that we should be drawing information from? Do you think the doctor read memes, or do you think that he read books? What's going on with that? So, I feel like backtracking a little bit, coming away from the direct topic and maybe working around it a little bit more might be a more productive way to address it. Instead of just kind of hitting them head on, and then they're just going to throw up their barrier and say, it doesn't matter what you say. The more that you try to prove me wrong is proof that I'm right and that I'm being oppressed and that this truth needs to be being suppressed and all these things. So just, I think that's how I would handle it, is just kind of work around it, find other avenues to address the same topic.
So there you go, TH, two talking heads giving their responses. Is that helpful to you at all?
Yeah, it's funny. I heard someone said, "Do you know why we don't see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it."
Yeah, I like that. I haven't heard that. That's good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when you say these things, they're like, "Oh, well, you're just buying into it or whatever." You know, they think that the world governments are all, they have meetings to secretly sell children as sex slaves, and I'm like,
yep. Yep. Well, TH, look at the previous caller that we just had, right? When we were trying to have a discussion, what happened? They said that, oh, we're actually all racist, and they knew our voting habits somehow. And, you know, like, that's what happens with these conversations sometimes, especially if you're losing an argument. You start to go to those ad hominems when people are saying, well, I can't convince this person, but you know what? The reason why is because they're trained by the media to say X, Y, and Z and these things. And they have to go to those places because they know that they can't really give the best argument at that time. Right. But if you really, you got to pin them anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, also what you said at the very beginning of the call was really important. Is you're talking about how they don't trust the government and they have all these reasons to say all these horrible things happen. Some of them were crazy. You know, the Vietnam was fake and whatever it was. But there are a lot of things to be upset about. Yeah, there are a lot of times when the government has lied and been horrible, monstrous, and like there are lots of things to be pissed off about. And you should be pissed off about those things. But then you have to draw the line of, okay, if we're talking about vaccines, that has nothing to do with the government, aside from the fact that, yeah, they would like you to get vaccinated. But those are private pharmacy companies. So, like, do you have an issue with these pharmaceutical companies? Are they part of the government? If so, where's your proof in that? Is it, you know, with this whole thing with the aliens? Yeah. Do you have a whole other layer there? Do these conspiracies affect these super powerful people? Every member of our government's been vaccinated. So, like, what are you actually saying here? How are these actually connected? So, yeah, it's tough when you have real things to be mad about, and then you start conflating in a bunch of nonsense.
Yep.
Definitely makes it more interesting.
For sure. Yeah.
I told them, it's not the government that gives you the shot. It's CVS or,
it's CVS. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. Like, and that's a thing that it's a particular pet peeve. Like, there was a caller on MD Aware when he was hosting who was saying, like, oh, well, how can we trust the government when the government's lied before? I was like, yeah, no, it was the CIA that was like upending the governments of South American and Middle Eastern countries, like, you know, in the past and also probably currently. Like, that's a particular set of people. And, you know, the reason we know that is because of either court cases that have happened that have revealed this stuff, public access of information. Like, the reason why we know MK Ultra wasn't just a thing somebody made up and somebody is real is because we have documentation for that. Like, there's still a method by which we know things is what I'm trying to say. The reason why we can actually point to and say for certainty that these events occurred is because of that evidence. You still have to have evidence for it. You can't just say, well, we can't trust them because X, Y, Z, they have an agenda. That's not enough. It wouldn't work in a court case. You can't just have a motivation. You have to have the means as well. Otherwise, most people wouldn't, convict on that. But, I'm not a lawyer, actually. I don't know if that's true. I don't think they would.
Imagine so.
I sounded pretty convincing, though, when I said it, I think. Anyway, TH, I hope this has been helpful to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think your last caller was just on hold with Alex Jones or something, and your line came open first.
It might be true. I wish we should. Yeah, fun fact, the old atheist community of Austin, I say the old, back when it used to be hosted in a public access building, I heard this from somebody. Apparently, it was the same building that Alex Jones used to host in his show back in the day.
Way.
Yeah, and awesome. Apparently Alex Jones has called into Atheist Experience. I think there's clips of that on YouTube from back in the day, but this was like 2000 or something. I don't know. It was way back. So that's a fun side story. But anyway, TH, we got to get to some other callers. But I hope
before you go, TH, really quick.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Really... I dropped him, but yeah, keep going.
Oh well, just really, if he's here, if he's listening, just if you want to have some fun, I understand these are your children and you might not want to go down this path, but just at a certain point, you might decide that this conversation isn't going to go anywhere and there's no hope for it. You can remind them of the conspiracy to spread all of these conspiracy theories. So that way, when people are so distracted by these theories, these conspiracies, they won't see the real conspiracy that's going on. So like, as long as you believe that the government is trying to poison you with vaccines, you're not seeing the actual other thing that's big brain. You know what I mean?
Big brain. That's a big brain take, Forrest. I appreciate that input. Thank you.
What'd you bring me here for?
Absolutely. And so before we get to another caller here, I need to remind you folks of some more fun stuff about the ACA, including how you can donate. You can donate directly to the show by hitting that little join button there on the side. If you're watching this on YouTube, and it's a cool thing to do. I've mentioned this before, but we recently got new emotes that you can use. It used to just be my face, and I'm glad you get to see the other faces now of the other people that host, and just some fun stuff. So people in the chat maybe doing some of those emotes right now as I'm talking about it. Thanks so much to everybody that hits join on there. And it's just another way you can support the atheist community of Austin. So thank you to everybody who does that.
It's fun and cool.
It's fun and cool. I agree. We have some. We got like 3 more calls, and I want all 3 of you guys to stay on the line if you can, and we'll try to do the show around these 3. I think. First, let's talk to Zim. Zim, who's calling in from Virginia. Zim, you're live on Truth Wanted.
Hi, Zim.
Hi. Hey, what's up, guys? So I actually had a question. I should mention I'm a medical student, and obviously I'm a big proponent of evolution and things like that, and I understand it pretty well. And I have a background in research and blah, 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 whatever. However, now I have nephews and nieces who are really young, and like between the ages of 7 and 12 or so, and I'm trying to explain to them concepts of like evolution or concepts of like speciation or so on and so on. And I'm just wondering specifically if you could make a video kind of outlining like at a kid level what this could be, but also like how would you go about approaching like this topic, especially when there are some concepts of like evolution that maybe I don't fully understand, and I have to tell them like, hey, I don't actually know this. And then, that might lead to, well, then that supports the alternative theory, which is like creationism or things like that, which have much less, or I would say no evidence to support.
Yeah. So I, first of all, you asked if I would make a video or other. I haven't told anybody about this yet. So don't tell anybody. It's a secret.
This is a Truth Wanted. Oh, it's an exclusive. We got an exclusive.
I'm working on something. It's a little mini series on my YouTube channel. Shameless self plug. It'll be later though, so don't hold your breath. It'll just give me a couple of weeks. I'm doing things, but don't tell anybody. So,
I did watch your Jack and Jane series. That one was really good.
Did you? I love that. That was a fun one. Oh my god! But yeah, so I'm working on that eventually. But as for right now, this is actually something that I use in that series, and this is something that I use in anytime I'm talking about like intro bio with especially like high schoolers or even younger. If they can understand what DNA is, then they can understand neo-Darwinian evolution, which is just saying that natural selection and trait and alleles work together. So here's all you have to know to understand evolution at a kid level, at a high school level, at an early college level. If you want to get evolution, here's all it is. 3 basic things. Number 1 is that DNA exists. We have to agree. Okay, DNA controls most of the things about your body. You're a medical student. You know how not true that is a lot of the time, but whatever, it's good enough. And so you have you use DNA. DNA is broken up in little chunks called genes. Each gene codes for a different thing, and you get these genes from your parents. If we can understand that, we can understand evolution. Number 2 is that there are different versions of these genes, what we call alleles. So there's not just one gene for having a hair color. There's a brown allele, and there's a black allele, and there's a blonde allele, and there's a red allele. So there's these different versions of these genes, and you can get all sorts of different kinds of them. Sometimes your parents give you 2 different alleles at the same time. Sometimes they just give you 1. It totally depends on everybody's different circumstances. If you can understand that different types of genes exist, you can understand evolution. And then finally, number 3 is that different alleles are better suited for life in different environments. So if you have all the best alleles for living in the jungle, that's great. You're going to die in the desert. And if you have all the best alleles for living in the Arctic, you're going to die in England, right? And so if you have the right alleles, you're going to live. And what's going to happen when you live? Well, you're going to have babies and you're going to pass on those same good alleles in that environment. And if you have the wrong alleles, you're not going to have any kids and you're not going to pass those alleles along. Or even if you do have kids, you're not going to have as many and they're not going to have as many because they have the same poopy alleles as well. And so over time, the best alleles for whatever environment you're in are going to stick around. And the worst ones for whatever environment you're in are going to go away. And so the best possible penguin is not going to make it here on the plains in North America. And the best possible jaguar isn't going to make it out in the outback in Australia because they have the best alleles for where they live. They meet the requirement of their environment. But everybody else doesn't have that. And they don't have what everybody else has either. And so at this point, you can break down into niches and into, selection pressures and all those things if you want to. But really, if you can understand those three basic axioms, genes exist, they come in different flavors, and certain kinds are better for life in certain environments, you can understand evolution. And I think that's how I would break it down for kids those ages.
There you go.
Okay, that's actually, that's perfect. The only other question I would have would be in relation to, I guess, explaining concepts like speciation. Especially, the concept, the one I typically like to give is like, you have these two animals, they live in this, I don't pick an animal, I usually pick frog or something, right? You have these two frogs, they live in the same place, and gradually over time, one group of frogs go to one slightly further away location, one goes to a slightly different location. And then, over time, they kind of adapt to their environment, whatever. However, that doesn't seem to like hit home. Do you have any good examples for speciation of like, obviously, we're not going to observe we may to some extent, but like we won't directly observe speciation per se in our lifetime. But do you have any good examples of what that would be like?
So what you described there with the frogs going off into a different environment and adapting to that new environment, that would be like allopatric speciation. That's something totally different. And there can also be sympatric speciation, where they speciate within the same environment under different pressures. You could have like niche partitioning there, where they live in different areas of the same swamp and they have different little mini niches there. And so their fundamental niche is different than the realized niche and all these fancy terminology. The thing that I would break down is that, and because this is tough concept, but it's really important. And if you can get it early, it's helpful, is just remind these kids that the word species doesn't really mean much. It's just a way that we categorize things. And there isn't actually one set definition for what a species is. And so when we see things adapting over the course of generations, that is evolution. Remember, the definition of evolution is any change in the heritable traits of a population from one generation to the next. Populations evolve, individuals don't. And we're talking about any change in any heritable trait. So if the allele frequency changes, that is evolution. So when you talk about like your example here of allopatric speciation, it's very easy to see. There's a bunch of turtles living in the plain, and then mountains get driven up in the middle by an earthquake, and now all of a sudden these turtles are in a desert and these turtles are in a marshland, and now they switch up a little bit. That's easy to understand. But when people talk about speciation, it's really important to remind them that we're drawing those lines absolutely arbitrarily. And if you say, well, if they can interbreed and produce fertile offspring, then they're the same species, sure, that's the biological species concept, not law, not theory, not definition, the concept. So the biological species concept, yeah, that's the case. By the phylogenetic species concept, by the Hanesian species concept, by the ecological species concept, by the fossil species, by all these other species concept, might have a different story. And how are you going to tell me that these two dinosaurs couldn't reproduce to produce fertile offspring? How are you going to prove that? So it's really important to point out that that's the whole thing with biology. Every single definition is kind of wiggly, and don't worry so much about when can we say this is officially a new species. Just notice the gradients, notice the pattern. What I like to do is show a gradient of like red fading into blue and say, okay, point where it starts to being red. You can't do it. And that's how it is as a species. If you had every single skeleton from me back to Ardipithecus ramidus, you couldn't say there's a human. It's just, it's a slow change.
But Forrest, like talking about dinosaurs, there's people that are like, dinosaurs can't be real because look at those things. How do they have sex? Like, it doesn't even make sense. That's what they'll point to. I have heard people say that. I just FYI.
That's incredibly rough.
I know. Yeah, it puts unpleasant images in the mind. But I can't add anything else to that. Forrest just covered everything, Zip. So I hope you don't have any more questions because, man, I think he gave a fantastic answer.
Well, thank you.
I don't. Yeah, that was perfect.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well,
I hope
Zip,
that's helpful,
thanks.
man.
Thanks so much for calling, and appreciate you giving your questions. And we still got
Good
two
luck
more
teaching.
callers. He loves teaching. That's why he's here. We got two more callers. So real quick, I just want to remind you folks that we're going to be in the after show on the Atheist Community of Discord. So tune into that if you're interested. And that's just a chance to talk to us kind of off air, ask us some more questions, ask us how we thought about the show, stuff like that. So do that if you haven't already. And I also want to remind you guys of the Facebook fan group that you can join. There is a Truth Wanted Facebook fan group where you can talk to other people who like the show and just talk about stuff that we don't always get to, or maybe stuff you want to see on the show. I see posts about that too, which is cool. So thanks to everybody that is already in that group. And let's go ahead and get to our next call. I think this is going to be a spicy one. So let's see what happens. This is Charles calling in from the UK. Charles, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello. Can you?
Hello. Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Nice. Yeah. Well, is my question like fair, or should I say it? I don't know how this works.
Well, I can read it if you want because the call screener took it. You're asking what is morally wrong with incest, and also related to the moral dumbfounding and use of contraception.
Okay. So, do you want me to explain what moral dumbfounding is, or should I?
Yeah, I am curious about what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm at university, and we had to study this thing called moral dumbfounding. And the general idea is a lot of people have moral intuitions, which they often can't justify, which are often almost like ingrained in us by evolution, by natural selection. So an idea is I'll create a thought experiment. So I'll be like, okay, Mark and Mary are brother and sister. They both go to the woods and they both have sex. And you have to assume this is true and always will be true. That A, they both use contraception. B, they don't tell anyone. And C, their bond of love is either positively affected or not at all. And then you're kind of asked, was this right or wrong? And most people go, oh, obviously that's wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then when you really, really push them, they can't find reasons as to why, say, in that particular scenario, incest is wrong. And I was just wondering, because I didn't really have a good enough answer myself, but I was just wondering why you thought incest might be wrong in certain instances. Because some people, the most common response is often, well, the children will get fucked up with incest. But then, as long as they carried on using contraception, I don't find that a very convincing answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering what you guys had to say about that.
Yeah, Charles, this is a fascinating thing to talk about because it hits on a couple different things here. One of them being concepts of morality, concepts of ethics, and what we actually mean when we say those things. And I find that even people in the secular community, when they talk about ethics, they don't talk about it in a way that's personally satisfying to me, because I do think that it's one of the harder things to talk about when you sort of lose your God belief. And I know that this isn't exactly related, but when you do have a God belief, it's kind of simple. It's whatever God says or whatever the Bible says, or your cultural interpretation of what the Bible says, that's what you should do. And so it's kind of simple. It's just kind of a checklist thing. But when you kind of deconstruct all that and you realize, oh, the people do things because they want to do it or they don't want to do it, that's kind of all the world really is. Now, people can intellectualize their reasoning and they can come up with principles that they may find sound and may be consistent. But as far as the deep-seated reasons to why or why not, it ultimately comes down to personal motivation. I am personally motivated to follow a sense of ethics that convinces me to commit to the least amount of suffering as possible. But if I tell people, why do I do that? It's really just because I want to. I don't know of any reason to say outside of that. So, and that's a hard thing to hear. Maybe there are some people who are really knowledgeable in ethics that would disagree with me, because obviously like that's one take, and a lot of people in our community have different takes on what morality is at the end of the day. But when it comes to incest, it has to be a thing where, as a collective, as a society, do we want to see that or not? And yeah, what about a relationship that doesn't bring about children? What do you do with that? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I can point to, we have psychological aversions to wanting to have sex with our immediate kinship groups because of the West Merrick effect, or because, there's things in our biology, but that doesn't explain morality, right? That's just using an appeal to nature. So we can't always go that route. You really have to appeal to more abstract concepts. Maybe you could make a utilitarian argument. Maybe you could make, some sort of consequentialist thing. I'm not sure. Personally, I have, if you look at YouTube channels like Soft White Underbelly that document what incest families or families of that are the product of incest go through, they're typically of low income. They're typically of low education, and they're typically are victims themselves of sexual abuse. So there's a lot of that stuff to consider that would personally make me be convinced that outlawing that sort of kind of relationship is good for society as a whole. But there might be people who could argue against that. I don't know, but it's very, very complicated, and that's sort of my complicated take on that. Forrest, I see you've got your thinking face on. What do you think?
I'm trying to look at this from every conceivable angle here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to really break this because, right off the bat, I understand that you're speaking in a hypothetical, perfect world where everything goes properly. Because, you can say, oh, they're going to use contraception. Well, contraception doesn't work a lot of the time. And is that worth the risk of bringing in a life of someone who is now damaged because of your actions? But assume that that's not an option. Maybe they're both sterile or something, whatever. There's also psychological issues there amongst the people themselves. That can be a dynamic depending on sibling age and rivalry and upbringing and things like that could potentially produce this kind of dynamic of power. It's the same reason why, even if it's consensual, prison guard can't have sex with a prisoner, because that is inherently rape no matter what. And so if you have this kind of power dynamic of growing up together, let's say that they're twins, that perfect in every way, completely raised the exact same, never had that. There's still an issue of that deep familiarity.
Cousins that were familiar with each
cousins
other.
Or something like that. There's still that issue of familiarity that can be a problem. Honestly, it's a big old bag of weird, of problems.
I have to imagine here, Forrest. Go ahead, Charles.
I can just quote some other examples. So, what's fascinating about moral dumbfounding is it not only pertains to things like our intuitions concerning incest, but also to so Jonathan Haidt, who you might have heard of, is the guy who coined a lot of this literature.
Right.
And
author of Thinking Fast and Slow and other great books. Yeah.
And then he uses another example, which is you have a pet dog, your dog gets run over, and then the daughter or something just eats the pet dog, and then it's oh, poor Dorothy the dog, she's now been eaten or whatever. And most people will be oh my God, that's obviously wrong. And then you're well, why not? The dog's dead. It's not going to do anything.
Sure.
And it's weird because when you point out that there's a lot of things like that I have a lot easier of a time jumping on than incest.
Yeah, because I have to imagine there are two consenting adults that are in an incestual relationship listening to this show right now. What would I say to them? Do I say, no, you can't do this? Am I of the moral authority? Do I have enough backing to say that? And I want to say yes. I want to say there's issues that are involved with this, but it's not it's not as it's not as hard hitting as it is for other issues. You know what I mean? Because we are talking about adults making decisions for themselves. But if it does involve the like you said, products of relationship dynamics that aren't healthy, or issues with potential offspring, that immediately complicates things, right? And that's what makes me lean towards the side of this shouldn't be acceptable. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. You're right. There is a more people. I imagine if you ask the average person, they wouldn't give very satisfying answers on
yeah,
this.
It's one of those things like the trolley problem. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's rough. Huh.
Exactly.
Well,
This is fun to think about.
I mean,
interesting thought experiment, Charles. Thank you.
Oh, definitely. I couldn't personally think of a satisfying answer, so I just concluded in some instances it might actually be fine, much as my intuitions rebel against that notion. Like, as much as I kind of, want to say incest is wrong in all cases, there might be like a minute, as you said, like there might be instances where they're sterile, and I can't really come up with a good enough reason as to say why that's unequivocally wrong. But I don't like that.
I've never had to think about this before, but now it's what I'm going to be thinking about for a minute.
There you go.
This around my head.
There you go, Charles. You got him thinking. You got him thinking with that big brain of his. So good job on that, Charles. Well, I appreciate your time and thank you. Go ahead, real quick.
I was also with the example of the dog. What's wrong with eating your own pet dog once it's died? Like that was another one. I was kind of like, oh, I have no idea how to even go about answering.
Yeah, if you're not religious, right? If you don't think that there's something sacred about the body, I think that's what a religious person would say, that there's some sort of moral ramifications, especially in ancient cultures. But maybe that belief was a byproduct of our evolution trying to tell us not to eat things that could potentially harm us, right? Because you could definitely get some diseases there from doing that if it's a human that you're eating, right? It's also a weird one there too. You're absolutely right.
See, and that one I have a lot more truck with. I can very easily be like, yeah, no, I'll eat a dog. I don't care. That's fine. Whatever. I have no issue with that. Because like as a biologist, I see everything as just the same kind of sack of meat. And so like it's like, bro, man, that one's easier than the other one. I wish you would have opened with that. We would have
right. Yeah, for sure. Well, Charles, that is all the time that we have for this particular call. But thanks again so much for talking to us and asking a very thought-provoking question. I'll be curious to see what people in the comments have to say about that one because it's not as like you think it's simple, but it's not. It's really not.
Yeah,
it's a little more complicated.
That's cool. That's the coolest thing is you expect it to be just like a hard line, but no. Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk we're going to talk to Barry, who's been waiting for a long time, calling in from New Zealand. There we go. Barry, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yeah, hi guys. Good to see you, Forrest. I've been watching your videos for a few months now, and I think what comes across is your enthusiasm. I just love it. I love it. It's great.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me.
I would say, that guy who was calling you racist and stuff, I think he missed his best argument, What he should have said is, Nathan Bedford Forrest helped start the KKK. Your name is Forrest, therefore...
It would have made a lot more sense than what he said.
Okay, I'll get off my point. We're running out of time, eh? I guess I'm thinking about my own experiences in being a student at high school. We studied science, and I went all the way through the high school system studying science, and then I years later ran into creationists, and I almost would have a brain freeze when I encountered them. Because I wasn't prepared for their arguments and just the weird ways of them approaching things. So I'm wondering if you see any value of including creationism in the school curriculum, not in the sense of advocating it, but more preparing students for what they're going to encounter in the outside world. Like, okay, you need to be aware that there's this whole bunch of ideas out there that you will come across, and maybe debunk some of the more common themes that they put across, because some of them can be fairly articulate, and I can imagine students being somewhat confused. Hey, I've never heard of this thing before. What's going on? Up to now, we've always said, let's keep creationism out of the curriculum, of course. But does it actually prepare students, if they were aware of it, Now, I would say even perhaps more so in America because it's not really an issue in New Zealand, right? But, you know, in America where it's out there and they're going to run into creationists, if they haven't been prepared for some of this, are we really helping them? I guess that's what I'm asking there.
Well, I want to respond first on this one, and I know, Forrest, you have a good answer to it, but I don't think, Barry, in the United States, adults are becoming creationists because other adults are convincing them. I think the greatest driver of creationism is kids learning it from adults. I sincerely believe that, and I think that there's statistics that back it up. I don't think creationism is growing. I think it grows as a Christian population grows worldwide, because we're seeing in places such as Africa and other places where missionary work is becoming more common, like in Christian populations growing, you're probably going to see more of that creationism. But I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Forrest, I don't think creationism is growing in the U.S.
Right? I really hope you're right.
I don't think it is. And for that reason, I would say it wouldn't be worth it because the utility of it wouldn't be there. And the other problem is at that point, if you're talking about religious arguments in a public school curriculum, that would be a violation of church and state. Like, even I think if it's debunking it, because it is kind of taking a side on some level. Like, I think it would be tricky to implement correctly. I think maybe you could do it in a secular way, but you definitely you'd raise a stink about it for sure. There's a lot of money that goes into, like creationist movements in the US in particular. Yeah. But like, I do think it probably would violate that. I don't know. What do you think, Forrest?
I think that it's really important to teach the history of science while you're teaching science. And I think that's where that would fall in. Rather than saying, hey, there's this thing called creationism and here's this stuff. You wouldn't do that in a geology classroom. You're saying, here's how the earth works. By the way, there are flat earthers out there. You know what I mean? You wouldn't do that. You would just say, at one point, we thought that the earth is flat. And then Eratosthenes came along and proved that that wasn't the case. And now for the past 4,000 years, we haven't thought that anymore. So the same thing with, we didn't know what atoms were. And then, Einstein and his clan figured out how to do, how atomic theory worked. And here now we understand atoms. And you go through the history of the different ways that we knew what atoms were and how they were shaped and what they were made of, and talk about the plum pudding model versus the orbital model and all these things. And so you, when you do that with evolution, when you talk about biology, you can do the exact same thing. You can say, hey, then, back in the 1700s, when we first started figuring out what fossils were, that was a very disruptive idea because for the longest time, scientists believe in what we called the great chain of being, where there was this hierarchy of all matter and life on Earth that was popped into existence exactly how it is. You don't have to bring up God. Just you explain that it was created by a deity or whatever, you know what I mean? If you want to include that and say there's this great chain of being, and then when it finally was finally discovered and accepted that no, these were animals that existed a long time ago and don't exist anymore, that was a crazy contentious idea. The idea of extinction was very controversial for its time. The idea of plate tectonics was very controversial for its time. For a long time, we thought that earthquakes happened because the earth was actually growing in size. It was inflating like a balloon. And up until the 1960s, it was still hotly debated as to whether or not plate tectonics should be taught in school because it's just a theory. And then we got over it and moved on. Evolution should go the exact same way. We can teach, hey, here's how it works. And we can talk a little bit about the history of these ideas. And that will equip them not only to understand the ideas that are real better, but also to have that debate when someone comes up and says, no, God made everything. You still believe that? That hasn't been true since the 1800s. We proved that wrong with this and this and this and this. All these different scientists proved it. And now you have the whole story and all the evidence behind you as well.
So, okay, I see your point, Forrest, but also a third of Americans still think that it's true, though, right? So it's like we almost can't talk about it as history. Like, oh, all these people used to believe in this because, like, there's a lot of people that still believe in it. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's where I would throw in, those comparative things. Is that like there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people who used to think that if you bury a child under your house alive, that will stop the wind spirits from knocking your house down. And then we learn geometry, and we don't do that anymore, right? And so, like,
yeah, I like your take on it, which is just balls to the walls. Fuck it, this is what it is, and you have to deal with it. That's kind of your strategy on this.
It usually is, and you don't have to go out of your way to be like, and here's why creationism is wrong. I would say just treat it like anything else. You know, we used to believe that, and some people still do, that diseases were caused by evil spirits, by witches, by punishment from gods, from whatever like this. And then we learned about microbiology and the germ theory, because remember, germs, viruses, and bacteria, that is a theory too. Germ theory was another revolutionary idea. It's a big deal. Cell theory asks, you know, some of these are creationists, hey, have you gone out and checked every single living thing, past, present, and future, to make sure that its body is made up of cells and only cells? Because that's cell theory, and it was because two scientists, one plant biologist, one animal biologist, both noticed about the same time that everything they studied was made of cells, and they combined forces to come up with cell theory. So, like, is that something that you're willing to accept, that life is made of cells? If so, why? Why does that evidence better? When you haven't, you know, so like this, when you learn the history of these things, it equips you not only to understand them better, but also to debate them better. And I think the caller's question was like, how should we be teaching about creationism in order to equip kids for when they get confronted with it, which is likely here in America. You don't have to. You don't have to teach creationism directly. You don't have to subject anybody to that any more than you would have to subject anybody to the great chain of being, or, you know, whatever else. You just teach them the history of the idea, and I feel like that is a better way to, like you said, go balls to the wall with the science without being confrontational, you know, about it.
Yeah, I think you've convinced me on some of this, because I never really thought about this question before, but in thinking about it, I think you're right. Maybe as a construct of like, well, this is what people have thought, and this is what current science thinks. Like, maybe that is within acceptable terms without violating, again, kind of that precedent of church and state separation that we seldom cherish here in the U.S., but should champion more.
It sucks that people like you and I have to worry about it so much more than the people who actually write Bible quotes up on the public school whiteboard, have crosses in the room, teach that evolution's only a theory and shouldn't be. All those things that happen literally every day, and nobody cares because you know, America's majority Christian.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, now I kind of wish I went to public school in New Zealand. That probably would have been pretty cool. Anyway, Barry, we gave our takes. Any responses? What do you think?
I appreciate the subtlety of it. I like it. I think that would work a lot better. Although, of course, you know, you're always going to have a small minority of, I'm trying to think of a polite word to use, but people who, no matter what you do, it won't take, you know. But yeah, I like it. And I think if it was, if it worked in alongside, say, discussions in, say, a social studies class, about related issues and things, and it could work.
And that's, you know, what you said is really important. There is that there are going to be some people who just are not going to listen to you. And I always say, you know, when you're teaching, if somebody tells you that you're not going to change their mind, you need to believe them, because you shouldn't waste your time trying to, you know, chip away at that. But honestly, when you just, you know, teach everything as it is and do it that way, I have had a lot more success with it, and it opens the door to more questions. And also, one more thing that I would say is that if anybody confronts you about how evolution isn't real or whatever like that, ask them some of the most common questions and objections that I get all the time about evolution. Okay, so let me ask you this: why are there still monkeys if humans came from monkeys? Ask them, why do, you know, evolutionists have so much faith in Darwin? Why do they just believe everything Darwin said? Ask them, how can random chance make something as complicated as an eyeball? Those are very, very, very easy questions if you understand how evolution actually works and how science actually works. So if they respond to you with, I know, right? Then you automatically, you know where you're standing now. You know that these people have been robbed of their science education. They have been cheated out of the opportunity to learn how this stuff actually works. you now have a totally different tactic of how you need to talk to them, because you know that if you come into it with jargon and with advanced topics, you're going to lose them. But if they're sitting here at this very basic level, not understanding why there are still monkeys around, then that's a new level of you can come down. Okay, so let's talk about what the definition of evolution is. Let's talk about what cladograms are. Let's talk about how phylogenies are built. Let's talk about how this stuff actually works, because clearly that's where we have to start.
Forrest really said, start a new tab in incognito mode and see where that gets you.
Education is subversive, man. It's a dance. It's a martial art. You have to be that way.
This man's coming up with military tactics to get through here. I like that. That's really fun. All right, well, Barry, thanks so much for calling in. Really appreciate you giving your call at the end of the show here. But we still had some other callers, and the crew is saying giving us the go to go a little over time. That's okay with you, Forrest. We got one more we at least want to take here. Yeah. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk to Paul, who's calling from Florida. Paul, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, I appreciate you extending. I'll try and make this quick. I just had to talk. I found Forrest a couple months ago, and you're right there alongside with my other favorite, which is Neil deGrasse Tyson. You're awesome.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me.
Great show. So much. Great show today, guys. And Dan, I watch you all the time. But here's the question. By people over time in history with environmental pressures that made people living in Africa had darker skin, people in Europe had lighter skin. And where I'm going with this is, hypothetically, if there was enough time and people were separated and could not travel over water, never got boats, anyway, would people in certain areas have possibly evolved into a new species?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we talked about that a minute ago. The phrase for that is allopatric speciation. So allopatric literally means just different country. And so when you have a species, a population that is divided by usually a physical barrier, but any kind of reproductive barrier, any kind of thing that stops them from mingling and separates them in some way, they're going to evolve in different directions, because the traits that arise, you have a mutation, can't become homogenous through the whole group. It just sticks to this one. And so you have this deviation. You have a disruptive selection. And so, yeah, that absolutely would be the case. And I can say that with confidence, because that's the case with literally anything. If you took any species of anything and split them up and didn't let them continue to reproduce together, and put them into different environmental conditions, they would, if they survived, evolve in different directions. Yes.
What Forrest is trying to say, let me summarize, is yes, mermaids could be real. And just because we haven't found them yet doesn't mean they're not out there. Okay. Little Mermaid, actually, biography. A lot of people
there are some really cool, this goes into what you're saying though with the caller. So there's a really cool population of humans that are a fishing population. They dive down, they spearfish deep in the water, and they've been holding their breath and diving under the water for generations. This is how their culture works on this island that they're isolated on. And what's really, really cool is that this population of humans are evolving bigger and bigger spleens, because your spleen is super important in your body, because it filters out your old red blood cells, and it also it is a store of extra oxygenated blood for emergency situations. And so when you're deep in the water and you're not breathing, your spleen can be like, yo, oxygen, and you get a little extra. And so these humans have spleens that are like 50% bigger than like the rest of the whole world. And that is literally evolution in humans, and we're isolated in a population under different selection pressures. It's almost allopatric speciation, but they're not actually speciated yet. They're not even species of humans. They're just really cool fucking humans who are doing this awesome thing. So that actually, yes, it can happen, and it's something you can observe. It's radical, dude. It's fucking radical. Talk to me about mermaids again. Listen, I dare you.
Fucking listen. This man, let me tell you, people who are listening to this at home, dude. Let me tell you, I got really scared because I thought Forrest was about to just explode on me about how mermaids were fucking real, and he was about to blow my fucking mind with some biology bullshit. But no, dude. He was just talking about fucking spleens for like 2 minutes.
If you're not excited about spleens, you need to go back to school.
Let me tell you, that's the heart of a teacher right there that can get excited that quickly.
That was spleens are radical.
We got to get off this
Spleens are
train.
radical and humans are
Forrest.
radical.
Last thing, I'll let you go. Forrest
Yeah.
not work. He does not have a job because he found a job that he loves to do. So he'll never work a day in his life.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, if you want to look it up, that is the Baju people in Southeast Asia. Baju, I think. The Baju people. Big old spleens. They're awesome.
All right.
Because they collect shellfish from the ocean floor.
The Baju people. I like that's a cool name. I like that. The Baju people. Anyway, Paul, thanks so much for calling in. We got to end the show now because Forrest is. I'm gonna start talking about dragons or something or giants, and Forrest is gonna just explode over here. So I'm
gonna go make an I Heart Spleen shirt for my merch store now.
That'd be awesome. I would love that. Anyway, Forrest, I want to give you a very special thanks again for being on today. You are really cool, and I'm so glad that we got to talk with you. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, you can check me out on the interbuts. You can go to valkylabs.com. I'm on the YouTubes. Just look up my name or Renegade Science Teacher, which is my handle on TikTok as well. I make people love science in themselves. And if you're into that, then go check me out. I promise that my quality of videos is better than this god-awful picture that I sent in.
It's not a bad picture. I don't know why you keep saying.
Oh man, I just hate pictures. I'm sure it's fine. I just like for someone who's on camera for a living, I photo shoots make me so uncomfortable. It's so weird. But thank you so much for having me, man. This is a lot of fun. I seriously appreciate the opportunity to come on here and share science and talk about religion with you.
Well, I have enjoyed having you, and I'm sure everybody listening has enjoyed having you too. So thanks again for being on. Folks, again, this is Truth Wanted. This show is live every week, 7 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to call in next time live, you should definitely do it. I'm always featuring new guests, and some other people host the show too. So check out this show if you haven't already. You should definitely subscribe and like this video. If you have not, you can find this show on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. Please also engage with it as best as you can to help other people find this show. This, again, show is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that also produces other cool shows that you should check out on the AEN Podcast Network. So tiny.cc/AEN Podcast is to check out all those other shows. And I'm on some of them too sometimes. So if you like me, you should definitely check those out. Before we go, I have to give a also wonderful special thanks to the fantastic, amazing, stupendous, splendorific, I just came up with that one, crew that helps make this show happen every single week. The crew can't handle the truth cam. Look at that. That's the crew that helps make the show happen, and they are magnificent. So thank you, crew, for doing that stuff. Folks, we are going to go to the after show on Discord. So if you're about to tune out, come check us out on Discord, tiny.cc/ACD Discord. Please come talk with us. Otherwise, we are going to be piecing out. Forrest, do you have any words of wisdom that you want to give us before we close out tonight's show?
Question everything, assume nothing, follow the evidence wherever it leads. If you can do those things, you'll be a scientist. Have an awesome day and never stop learning.
I like that. I think my words of wisdom for today is keep diving underwater, and eventually your spleen is going to get just jacked, bro. Just ripped.
Not
you.
All how it works, but sure.
No, your children's spleens are
your
going to
children's spleens. Do it for the spleens of your progeny.
Do it for the spleens of your progeny. I'm Objectively Dan. This has been Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between The Atheist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.